Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
Growing up, my brother, Ethan, was the one who could do no wrong. He was the golden boy, the prodigy, the one whose achievements lit up every family conversation. Straight-A student, star athlete, and now a rising star in the corporate world. Ethan's life was a curated highlight reel. And me? I was the creative wild card. While Ethan excelled in his perfectly linear path, I was the dreamer, sketching out business ideas in the margins of my notebooks and taking late-night dives into entrepreneurial forums. My parents liked to call it quirky ambition, which sounded better than what they really meant: unstable. "It's not that we don't believe in you," Mom would say, her voice tinged with concern. "We just want you to have something reliable to fall back on. Not every idea works out." I stopped sharing my business ventures with them after a while. It wasn't worth the pitying looks or the well-meaning advice to be more like Ethan. By the time I started sketching out my most promising idea, a niche e-commerce app connecting local artisans with buyers, I kept it close to the chest. It wasn't just a pipe dream. It was my ticket to proving I could succeed on my own terms. Then one weekend, Ethan came over for family dinner. We hadn't talked much lately, but over lasagna, he leaned in with his trademark charm. "What are you working on these days?" he asked, genuinely curious, or so I thought. I hesitated but decided to share. "I've been planning an app," I said. "Something that connects local artisans with buyers. Think Etsy, but more curated and personalized." Ethan nodded, chewing thoughtfully. "That's an interesting concept. Have you started building it?" "Not yet," I admitted. "I'm still in the research phase. But I think it has a lot of potential." "I bet it does," he said with a smile. "You've always had a knack for thinking outside the box." His interest felt refreshing, almost validating. For once, it seemed like Ethan saw me as more than just his quirky younger sibling. Or so I thought. A month later, I was mindlessly scrolling through LinkedIn when a post stopped me cold. There it was, Ethan's smiling face alongside a flashy announcement for his exciting new startup. The tagline sent my heart plummeting: "Connecting local artisans with buyers through a personalized shopping experience." My app, my idea, my dream. I stared at the screen, while rising in my throat. The comments beneath the post were a chorus of praise. "Brilliant concept. So innovative." Another win for Ethan. I wanted to scream. He hadn't just taken my idea, he'd launched it. And judging by the buzz around his post, it was already gaining traction. That night, I replayed every moment of our dinner conversation in my head, realizing too late how I'd handed my plans over on a silver platter. How could he do this to me? And worse, how could I ever make my parents see the truth when Ethan, their golden boy, had already claimed the crown for my idea? I didn't wait. The second I saw Ethan's LinkedIn post, I called him. My fingers trembled as I hit dial, my mind racing with all the things I wanted to say. He answered on the second ring, his tone relaxed, as if he hadn't just stolen the idea I'd poured my heart into. "Hey, what's up?" he said, sounding like he'd just finished a workout or a satisfying cup of coffee. "What's up?" I snapped, unable to hold back the anger bubbling inside me. "I just saw your post about the app. Ethan, you stole my idea." There was a pause. I could hear him breathing on the other end, and for a brief second, I thought he might admit it. Instead, he played dumb. "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about," I said, my voice shaking. "The app. The one that connects artisans to buyers? The one I told you about over dinner? The one you just launched as your own?" He sighed, the kind of condescending sigh that made my blood boil. "Okay, look. I remember you mentioning something like that, but it's not like you own the idea. You were just brainstorming. I took it and made it real. You stole it," I shot back. "And you didn't even bother to include me or give me credit. How is that not theft?" "It's not theft," he said flatly. "You didn't do anything with it. Ideas are a dime a dozen. It's execution that matters." I wanted to scream. "You've got some nerve," I said through gritted teeth. "This was my dream, Ethan. My hard work. And you swooped in and took it without even asking." "Come on," he said, his tone hardening. "This isn't personal. You're acting like I did this to hurt you. I didn't. It was just a good idea, and I knew how to make it happen." "Unbelievable," I muttered before hanging up. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop obsessing over Ethan's betrayal. His app was everywhere: LinkedIn posts, glowing Instagram stories, and even a write-up in a local business magazine. He was being hailed as a visionary entrepreneur, while I was left sitting in the shadows, feeling like the biggest fool alive. I started digging into his app, dissecting every feature, every marketing strategy. The more I uncovered, the angrier I got. Not only had he taken my idea, but he'd replicated nearly every detail I'd shared with him, right down to the personalized shopping algorithm I'd been so proud of. And the worst part? It was polished and professional in a way I couldn't compete with. Ethan had resources, connections, funding, and most importantly, the unwavering support of our parents. I couldn't count the number of times I'd heard Mom and Dad say, "Ethan just has a gift for this sort of thing," while they brushed off my achievements as hobbies or whims. But this time, I wasn't going to sit quietly and let it slide. I decided to confront my parents. If anyone could hold Ethan accountable, it was them, or so I thought. I stopped by their house one evening, determined to make them see what he'd done. "Ethan stole my app idea," I said bluntly as we sat down at the kitchen table. Mom looked up from her tea, her brow furrowing slightly. "What do you mean? The app he just launched? He's been working on that for months." "No, Mom," I said, my voice firm. "I told him about the idea last month. I explained the entire concept over dinner. He took it and ran with it without telling me." Dad raised an eyebrow, looking skeptical. "Are you sure? I mean, it's not exactly a unique concept, is it? Apps like that are everywhere." "It's not just about the concept," I said, frustrated. "It's the details, the execution. He copied everything I told him. He didn't even try to change it." "Well," Mom said carefully, "even if that's true, maybe it's a sign you need to act faster next time. You've always been a great thinker, but Ethan, he's a doer. Maybe you could learn something from him." Her words felt like a slap. "Are you seriously defending him?" I asked. "He stole from me, and you're acting like it's my fault?" "Don't be dramatic," she said dismissively. "You should be proud that your idea inspired him. And honestly, Ethan's always had a knack for turning ideas into reality. It's just who he is." I stared at them, incredulous. "So that's it? You're just going to let him get away with this because he's Ethan?" Dad shrugged. "At least he's doing something productive with it. If it was such a great idea, why didn't you move on it sooner?" I left their house that night feeling more betrayed than ever. It wasn't just Ethan. It was all of them. My family, the people who were supposed to have my back, were acting like my hard work didn't matter. But if they thought I was going to let this slide, they had another thing coming. Determined to fight back, I threw myself into research. If Ethan thought he could get away with stealing my idea, he had another thing coming. I started by scrutinizing his app, every detail, every feature, every flaw. I scrolled through the website, testing its functionalities and reading user reviews. What I saw made my blood boil. The app wasn't just inspired by my idea. It was practically a copy-paste of the plans I'd shared with him. Even the name was eerily similar to one I'd brainstormed, except with a slightly more corporate spin. But there were cracks beneath the shiny surface. While the concept was solid, of course it was mine, the execution was sloppy. Reviews pointed out bugs, slow load times, and a customer service team that seemed non-existent. Some users praised the idea but complained about how hard it was to use. Others said it felt like the app was rushed to market without proper testing. That's when it hit me. Ethan might have had the resources to launch first, but he didn't have the passion or understanding of the space. He'd rushed out a half-baked version of what I'd envisioned, and it was starting to show. The real breakthrough came when I called Sarah, an old friend who worked in the tech industry. She was sharp, well-connected, and, most importantly, owed me a favor from back when I'd helped her with a startup idea of her own. "Let me see what I can dig up," she said after I told her the situation. A week later, she came back with news that made me sit up in my chair. "Your brother's app looks good on the surface, but it's bleeding money," she said. "From what I can tell, he launched big but doesn't have the infrastructure to sustain it. His servers are struggling, the user base is churning because of the bugs, and his team is stretched thin. Plus, he's burning through funding faster than he can secure more." I let her words sink in. Ethan had made a splash with his launch, but it seemed like he was in over his head. If he didn't fix the problem soon, to implode. Part of me wanted to sit back and watch it all collapse. But another part of me saw an opportunity. If Ethan's app was floundering, this was my chance to carve out space for my own. Unlike Ethan, I understood the market and the artisans it was meant to serve. I could build something better, something true to my original vision, but I had to act fast. Fueled by a mix of anger and determination, I dove headfirst into building my version of the app. I knew I couldn't match Ethan's funding or marketing, but I had one thing he didn't: authenticity. I started by reaching out to artisans I'd connected with through my e-commerce business. I explained my vision and asked what they needed most from a platform like this. Their feedback was invaluable. While Ethan's app tried to be all things to all people, I focused on creating a niche, user-friendly experience that truly catered to the artisan community. Late nights turned into early mornings as I worked tirelessly to bring my vision to life. I poured everything I had into the project, my time, my savings, my passion. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. But just when I started to feel like I was gaining momentum, Ethan pulled another move that sent my plans spiraling. It was clear he wasn't done trying to stay ahead. Just when I thought I was gaining ground, the cracks started to appear. My app was almost ready for a soft launch, and I was optimistic. Artisans were responding well to my platform, excited about the personal touch I'd built into the user experience. Then the emails started coming in. One by one, vendors who'd signed on to my app began backing out. At first, I thought it was just nerves. Small business owners can be hesitant about new platforms. But the messages had a disturbing pattern. "I'm sorry, but I've decided to go with another app," one vendor wrote. Their team reached out directly and made some excellent points about long-term stability. Another email read, "I've been advised that your platform might not be as reliable as I thought. I can't take the risk right now." I stared at my screen in disbelief. Another app? There was only one other app in this space, and I knew exactly who ran it. I called Ethan, my hands shaking as I held the phone to my ear. "Wow, twice in 1 week," he said when he answered. "You're really keeping tabs on me, huh?" "Cut the crap," I said through gritted teeth. "Are you poaching my vendors?" There was a pause, just long enough to confirm my suspicions. "If people are leaving your platform, maybe that's on you," he said smugly. "They're leaving because you're feeding them lies about my business." I shot back. "You're telling them I'm not reliable, that my platform won't last. You're sabotaging me, Ethan." "Relax," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "This is how the game works. If your vendors are jumping ship, it's because they see more potential in my app. That's not sabotage, it's strategy. It's theft," I snapped. "First you stole my idea, now you're undermining my work. What more do you want from me?" He laughed, a cold, hollow sound that sent a chill down my spine. "I want to win," he said simply. "And if you can't handle competition, maybe you're in the wrong business." I hung up, my heart pounding. I refused to let Ethan win. That night, I started contacting the vendors who had left, hoping to salvage the relationships. Some didn't respond, but others agreed to hear me out. One artisan, a ceramicist named Laura, was brutally honest. "Your brother made some compelling arguments," she said. "He pointed out that his app has more funding and a larger user base. He said you're new to this and might not have the resources to support us long-term." Her words stung, but I couldn't blame her. Ethan had used his network and resources to paint me as inexperienced and unstable. Everything I'd worked so hard to overcome. "Laura," I said carefully, "do you think his platform understands your needs better than mine does?" She hesitated. "Not necessarily. I liked how personal your approach was. But I can't afford to take risks right now." "Then let me prove to you that I'm not a risk," I said. "Give me a chance to show you what I can do. If you're not satisfied after the first month, I won't charge you a dime." It was a bold offer, but it worked. Laura agreed, and a few other vendors followed suit. Slowly, I began rebuilding the trust Ethan had tried to destroy. Still, I knew this wasn't over. Ethan had made it clear he'd do whatever it took to stay ahead, and I couldn't shake the feeling that his next move would be even more ruthless. The letter came in an unassuming envelope, its stark, professional formatting betraying the chaos it would unleash. A cease and desist order. Ethan, through his lawyer, was demanding that I immediately shut down my app, alleging it infringed on his intellectual property. I read the letter over and over, my hands trembling. It was full of legalese meant to intimidate, but the underlying message was clear. Ethan was prepared to drag me to court if I didn't back off. For a moment, I let the fear set in. I didn't have Ethan's resources. He could hire an army of lawyers while I could barely afford my current development costs. But then the anger kicked in. He stole my idea, and now he was trying to paint himself as the victim? The audacity was breathtaking. I called Sarah, the only person I trusted to help me navigate this. "He sent you a cease and desist?" she asked, her voice sharp with disbelief. "Yeah. He's claiming I'm infringing on his intellectual property," I said, pacing my living room. Sarah snorted. "Typical bully move. He's trying to scare you into giving up because he knows your app is gaining traction. What if he actually files a lawsuit?" I asked, the anxiety creeping back into my voice. "Let him," she said. "You've got receipts, right? You documented everything. Your sketches, your emails, the timelines?" I did, I said. But you know how this works. It's not just about being right. It's about who has more money and time. Sarah was quiet for a moment, then said, if he's going to play dirty, you need to make it clear you're not rolling over. Go public. The thought stopped me in my tracks. You mean, call him out publicly? Exactly. Lay out the timeline, show your evidence, and let people decide for themselves who's in the right. If he's trying to bully you, shining a light on his tactics might be the best way to stop him. It was a risky idea, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I had nothing to lose. I spent the next week writing a detailed blog post. I outlined everything. How I'd come up with the idea, how Ethan had stolen it, and now how he was trying to intimidate me into quitting. I included screenshots of my original sketches, emails, and even a few snippets of our text exchanges, careful not to name Ethan directly, but making the story clear enough for anyone paying attention. When I hit publish, I felt a mix of terror and relief. Within hours, the post started gaining traction. By the next day, it had gone viral. Comments poured in, most of them supportive. People called Ethan's actions predatory, unethical, and disgusting. A few even posted reviews on his app, denouncing him for his behavior. The pressure forced Ethan to respond. He gave a carefully worded interview, dismissing my claims as bitterness and an attempt to ride his coattails, but the evidence I'd presented was damning, and the public wasn't buying his excuses. Then, out of the blue, I got an email from someone named Lisa. The subject line read, "Former employee, you need to know this." Lisa turned out to be one of Ethan's former project managers, and what she told me changed everything. "I saw your blog post," she wrote. "I used to work for Ethan, and I think you deserve to know the truth. He didn't just steal your idea. He cut corners everywhere to get his app launched quickly. There's a reason it's riddled with glitches. If you're willing to fight back, I have proof that could help you." Attached to the email were several internal documents, including emails and meeting notes from Ethan's team. One email in particular stood out, a conversation between Ethan and his lead developer discussing my app. "She'll never get it off the ground," Ethan had written. "Let's just take the concept and push it out before she has a chance to do anything." My hands shook as I read the email. This wasn't just unethical. It was deliberate, calculated theft. And now, thanks to Lisa, I had the proof I needed to expose him completely. I called Sarah immediately. "You're not going to believe this," I said, forwarding her the documents. Her response was immediate. "You need to go public with this now." And that's exactly what I planned to do. The email from Leah felt like a lifeline, but it also carried a weight I wasn't sure I was ready for. Her words promised a truth that could dismantle Ethan's empire, but exposing it meant playing a game I'd never intended to enter. Still, I couldn't ignore her message. I called her the next morning. "Are you sure you want to do this?" she asked as soon as we connected. "If Ethan finds out I talked to you, I could lose everything." "I understand," I said carefully. "I won't ask you to break any NDAs or do anything illegal. But if you can confirm what I suspect, that Ethan stole my idea, this could change everything." There was a long pause before Leah sighed. "Okay, here's what I can tell you." Leah started by confirming my worst fears. Ethan had presented my concept to his team as his own. "He showed us notes that were clearly written by someone else," she said. "We all knew they weren't his ideas, but he was the boss. No one questioned it." "Did he say where he got the notes?" I asked, my heart pounding. "He said they were from a family member," Leah admitted. "He didn't name you, but it was obvious he'd taken the idea from someone close to him. He told us we had to launch before you did, no matter what it took." I clenched my fists, anger boiling just beneath the surface. It wasn't just theft. It was deliberate, premeditated sabotage. Leah went on to describe the chaos behind the scenes. "The app was never ready for launch," she said. "Ethan pushed us to cut corners just so he could beat you to market. The glitches, the bad reviews, it's all because he prioritized speed over quality. And now, he's paying the price." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Users are leaving in droves," Leah said. "Investors are getting impatient. They're already questioning his leadership, and if this story gets out, it could sink him." Leah's revelations gave me the clarity I needed. Ethan wasn't as untouchable as he wanted me to believe. His cease and desist letter wasn't just a legal maneuver. It was a desperate attempt to stop me from gaining ground. But now I had the upper hand. "Thank you for telling me this," I said. "I promise I won't reveal your identity. But this changes everything." Over the next few days, I worked tirelessly to get ahead of Ethan's narrative. I reached out to journalists, tech bloggers, and influencers, sharing my story as a small business owner who had been targeted by corporate greed. The response was overwhelming. Articles started popping up with headlines like "Small Entrepreneur Stands Up to Goliath" and "Family Feud. How One Sibling Stole Another's Startup Idea." Ethan tried to counter the story, issuing a statement calling my claims baseless and motivated by jealousy. But it was too late. Public opinion had already turned against him, and the backlash was brutal. Then, just when I thought I'd seen it all, Leah reached out again with a bombshell. "I found proof that Ethan knew he was stealing your idea. There's an email trail where he explicitly discusses your concept with his team." She forwarded me the emails, and my jaw dropped as I read them. "Let's use my name's idea but tweak it enough to make it look original," Ethan had written. "She'll never be able to prove it in court." The evidence was damning. Not only did it confirm the theft, but it also showed Ethan's blatant disregard for ethics or integrity. With Leah's permission, I handed the emails over to one of the journalists covering the story. Within hours, they went public. The fallout was immediate and devastating for Ethan. The headlines the next day told the full story. "Rising Star Exposed for Stealing Family Member's Idea," and "Leaked Emails Confirm App Founder's Deceit." Ethan's investors pulled out almost overnight. Users abandoned his platform en masse, many of them migrating to mine. For the first time, it felt like justice had been served. But I knew this wasn't just about winning the battle. It was about ensuring that Ethan, and anyone like him, would think twice before trying to exploit someone else's hard work ever again. Ethan's downfall was the kind of poetic justice I'd only dreamed of. The news of his removal as CEO spread quickly through the tech world, and the public backlash was fierce. Social media lit up with debates about ethics and entrepreneurship, with many hailing me as a whistleblower who stood up to corporate greed. But as satisfying as it was to see Ethan finally face the consequences of his actions, I knew there was still more to do. His app was still operational, and I had to ensure that his removal wasn't just a symbolic gesture. I focused on his investors next. Leah had already provided me with valuable intel about the company's internal struggles, and with her help, I put together a dossier detailing the full extent of Ethan's unethical practices. I highlighted not only his theft of my idea, but also his reckless management, which had jeopardized the app's long-term viability. I sent the report to the investors directly, knowing they were likely already considering their options. If they weren't aware of the app's shaky foundation before, they certainly were now. The investors' response was swift. Within days, they issued a public statement announcing their intention to restructure and refocus the app's development. The platform itself was put on pause, and a third-party audit was commissioned to evaluate its viability moving forward. Ethan's legacy, if you could even call it that, was effectively erased. The app that he had built on stolen ideas and shady tactics was now in the hands of professionals who were far more concerned with salvaging its reputation than propping up its disgraced founder. I'd won, but as much as I wanted to celebrate, there was still a lingering bitterness I couldn't shake. This victory hadn't come easily. It had cost me countless sleepless nights, strained my relationships, and forced me to fight battles I never should have faced in the first place. Ethan, predictably, didn't take any of this quietly. He called me the day the investor's statement was released, his voice a mix of anger and desperation. "You've destroyed everything," he said, his tone accusatory. "Do you even care what this has done to our family?" "Our family?" I scoffed. "You mean the family that always put you on a pedestal and dismissed me as the black sheep? Maybe it's time they saw the truth about you." "You don't get it," he spat. "They're furious with you. Mom and Dad are devastated." "Good," I said bluntly. "Maybe now they'll finally see the consequences of enabling you all these years." There was a long pause, and then Ethan said something I wasn't expecting. "You think you're better than me, don't you?" "No," I replied. "I just know I'm not a thief." He hung up without another word. The fallout from Ethan's reckoning rippled through the family, just as he had warned. My parents called me the next day, and their disappointment was palpable. "Why did you have to go so far?" Mom asked, her voice trembling. "I didn't go far enough," I said firmly. "Do you even understand what he did? He stole my idea, sabotaged my business, and then tried to sue me." "He brought this on himself." "But he's your brother," Dad said. "Family forgives. Family also holds each other accountable," I shot back. And for once, someone had to stand up to him. They didn't see it that way, of course. In their eyes, I was the villain who had torn the family apart. But for the first time, I didn't care. I wasn't going to let their guilt trips overshadow what I had accomplished. Ethan might have been the golden boy, but I was the one who had stood my ground and fought for what was right. And that was a victory I could finally be proud of. Ethan's downfall sent shockwaves through our family, fracturing relationships that had already been strained for years. My parents were devastated, not by what Ethan had done, but by the consequences he now faced. When they called me, it was less about seeking clarity and more about assigning blame. "What did you do to your brother?" Mom demanded, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. "I didn't do anything to him," I replied calmly. "He did this to himself. All I did was refuse to let him get away with it." "Do you think this is something to be proud of?" she snapped. "He's your brother. You could have handled this privately, but instead, you humiliated him in front of everyone." "He humiliated himself," I countered. "If he hadn't stolen my idea, sabotaged my business, and lied to everyone, none of this would have happened. He chose this path, not me." Dad finally spoke up, his voice weary. "You didn't have to escalate it like this," he said. "Family is supposed to support each other. I've been supporting this family my whole life." I shot back. "And what did that get me?" "Ignored, dismissed, and betrayed. Forgive me if I'm done playing the scapegoat while Ethan gets away with everything." Mom started to cry, but I didn't budge. "You've spent your entire lives making excuses for him," I said quietly. "Maybe if you'd held him accountable earlier, he wouldn't be in this mess now." The call ended with Mom hanging up on me, leaving a tense silence between us that stretched on for weeks. As much as I wanted to move on, the family rift weighed heavily on me. My parents' refusal to acknowledge Ethan's wrongdoing felt like a betrayal in itself. It wasn't just about the stolen idea anymore. It was about years of favoritism, excuses, and unspoken resentment finally boiling over. Meanwhile, my app continued to flourish. The public support had turned into a wave of new users, and vendors were reaching out daily, eager to join the platform. For the first time, I felt like I was stepping out of Ethan's shadow and proving my worth on my own terms. But success didn't erase the pain of losing my family. Every achievement, every milestone, was accompanied by a pang of sadness, knowing that the people who should have been cheering me on were instead blaming me for Ethan's downfall. Then, out of nowhere, Ethan reached out. The call caught me off guard. His name flashing on my screen was the last thing I expected to see. I debated ignoring it, but decided to answer, my curiosity outweighing my anger. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," he said as soon as I picked up. I was silent for a moment, processing his words. "For what?" I asked cautiously. "For everything," he admitted. "For stealing your idea, for trying to shut you down, for not respecting you the way I should have. I thought I could get away with it, but I was wrong." His tone was quieter than I'd ever heard, almost defeated. Part of me wanted to lash out, to make him feel the full weight of what he'd done. But another part of me, the part that still hoped for a relationship with my brother, softened. "I appreciate the apology," I said carefully, "but words aren't enough, Ethan. You need to actually change." "I know," he said, "and I'm trying. More than you probably believe." It wasn't the sweeping gesture of accountability I'd imagined, but it was something. A start, at least. As we hung up, I realized that while the wounds Ethan had caused would take time to heal, this small step forward might be the beginning of a new chapter. For him, for me, and for our fractured family. Ethan's apology sat with me like an unresolved chord. Part of me wanted to believe he'd changed, but after years of betrayal and manipulation, I wasn't sure if I could. Trust isn't something that can be restored with a few kind words. It's built through actions, consistency, and time. Still, I decided to meet him. When I walked into the cafe, he was already there, sitting at a corner table, looking smaller somehow. He wasn't dressed in his usual buttoned-up, polished style. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair a little unkempt. For the first time, he didn't look like the untouchable golden boy our family had always seen him as. He just looked like my brother. "Thanks for coming," he said as I sat down. His voice was subdued, almost hesitant. "I almost didn't," I admitted, my tone guarded. "But I wanted to hear what you had to say." Ethan sighed and leaned forward, his hands wrapped around a coffee cup. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said. "About the app, about us, about everything. I was so caught up in trying to prove myself that I didn't care who I hurt along the way. And I hurt you. I know that." I stayed silent, letting him talk. "I've always felt like I had to live up to this image," he continued. "Mom and Dad put me on this pedestal, and I felt like I couldn't afford to fail. So I started cutting corners, making decisions I knew weren't right. And when I saw your idea, I don't know. I didn't think, I just acted. I wanted the win so badly that I didn't care about the cost." His admission caught me off guard. For the first time, Ethan wasn't trying to spin the narrative or make excuses. He was laying his insecurities bare, and it was both disarming and sad to see. I didn't let him off easy. Ethan, you didn't just make a mistake. You betrayed me. You took something I created, turned it into your own thing, and tried to push me out of the picture entirely. And when I fought back, you made me feel like I was the one in the wrong. He nodded, his face drawn. I know, and I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I want to make it right, whatever that looks like. I crossed my arms, leaning back in my chair. And how do you plan to do that? I've already started, he said. I resigned from the apps board. I've been meeting with some of the artisans to apologize for the way I handle things. And I'd like to use my platform to support your app. Publicly. His words surprised me. You do that? I owe you that much, he said. More than that, honestly. You were right all along. You didn't just have a good idea. You had the heart to make it work. And I didn't. For the first time, I saw a flicker of the Ethan I remembered from our childhood. The one who used to cheer me on, before the pressures of adulthood turned him into someone I barely recognized. Ethan followed through on his promise. A week later, he posted a long, heartfelt message on social media, admitting to everything. The app one created was inspired by my sister's original idea, he wrote. She had the vision and passion that I lacked, and instead of supporting her, I made the wrong choice. I'm incredibly sorry for the pain I caused her, and I'm committed to making amends. The post went viral, drawing attention not just to my app, but to the larger story of ethics and accountability in the tech industry. Overnight, my platform saw a surge in users and artisans wanting to join. But more importantly, the narrative shifted. I wasn't just the sister who fought back. I was the creator, the visionary, the one who had stood firm against the odds. It didn't fix everything between Ethan and me, but it was a step. For the first time in years, I felt like we were on the same side, rebuilding the fractured trust between us. And while it wasn't perfect, it was enough, for now. Ethan's public apology and acknowledgement marked a turning point, not just for my app but for me personally. The validation wasn't just about being right. It was about finally feeling seen, about reclaiming my voice after years of feeling overshadowed. It didn't erase the betrayal or the hurt, but it gave me the clarity I needed to move forward. The app continued to grow, far exceeding my expectations. With the surge in users and artisans, I reinvested the profits wisely, building a small but dedicated team to help me expand the platform. For the first time, I felt like a true business owner, someone capable of turning a dream into a reality. And this time, it was undeniably mine. The media attention surrounding my story died down eventually, but the impact remained. Artisans trusted my platform not just because it was well designed, but because it was built with integrity. That trust became my foundation, and I made a promise to myself never to compromise it. My relationship with Ethan was still fragile, but it was improving. He stuck to his word, using his platform to promote my app and directing his remaining supporters my way. It was a small gesture in the grand scheme of things, but it showed that he was trying. One afternoon, we met for coffee again. This time, at his suggestion, he brought a notebook filled with ideas for a new venture he was working on, something entirely unrelated to the tech space. I want to do it right this time, he said. No shortcuts, no stealing. Just my own hard work. He hesitated, then added, I could use your advice. It was a surreal moment. For years, Ethan had been the one who seemingly had it all figured out, while I struggled to gain my footing. Now, he was asking for my input, and it felt like a subtle acknowledgement of how far I'd come. I'll help you, I said, after a pause. But don't expect me to hold back if I think you're screwing up. Ethan laughed softly. Fair enough. I'd expect nothing less. Trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt overnight, but it was a start. As for my parents, the divide between us remained. They still resented how publicly the situation had played out, blaming me for airing family business and tarnishing Ethan's image. Even though they admitted his apology was necessary, their support for him never wavered. I stopped trying to bridge the gap. For years, I'd bent over backward to maintain a sense of peace, sacrificing my own needs and happiness in the process. But this time, I let it go. I didn't owe them the version of myself that made them most comfortable, especially at my own expense. In the quiet months that followed, I focused on my app and my future. The journey had been messy and painful, but it had taught me some invaluable lessons. I learned the importance of standing up for myself, of trusting my instincts, and of never letting anyone, family or not, diminish my worth. Ethan and I were proof that people could change, though it wasn't always easy or pretty. As we slowly rebuilt our relationship, I held on to a cautious optimism. He'd made mistakes, but he was taking steps to make amends. And while the past couldn't be undone, the future was wide open. Looking back, I realized that success wasn't just about building something tangible. It was about knowing your own value and fighting for it, no matter who tried to take it from you. Because in the end, the only person who could define my success was me.